Talking about trust. There's a book on trust. I don't agree with any of it. In part because of my experience in the military. And something Simon Sinek talks about is, he says, the world doesn't know how to build trust. And I would say it's complicated because it's reasonable. He doesn't know about Chris Voss, though Simon Sinek does know about how the military, at least he learns how the military partly builds trust. One thing he mentions is that when soldiers admit to something they screwed up, then they gain, or at least maintain, they might maintain trust. And I think that's a good way to put it is, and so when soldiers deny doing anything wrong, then they lose trust. They maintain trust by admitting to something they've done wrong. And they build trust by personal experience. From my experience in the military, we build trust by reliable action. Some things happen in the military where we don't necessarily have to say anything. Everyone knows their jobs, and when something happens, everybody knows what to do. Usually we don't have to say anything, things just start happening. And that's one way to build trust, is don't have to beg, borrow, and plead. Like a good correlation or explanation, similar example is where somebody goes to a door, whether it's a store or business, with their arms full, and a stranger might hold the door open for them, whether the stranger's going in or coming out, or just a bystander sitting by the door. You might hold the door open for somebody you know, somebody you don't know, and that's a good summary to explain how the military builds trust. Is you just know that the right thing to do is to hold the door open for them, and similarly in the military, you see things happen, you know what you got to do, you just do it. So that brings me to Chris Voss. And Chris Voss talks about trust. And I think it's fair to say that Chris discovered how to build trust using words. Chris says there's 3 things. Keeping them informed. A good example of that is Rory, economist, his last name escapes me. He says taxis have learned to provide an electronic map to show where the taxi is, shows how far the taxi is from the customer, and so the customer knows, they're informed about how long the taxi might be, and so that's one way to keep them informed. Another way to explain keeping them informed is, there's a common saying with children is, it said, bad attention is better than no attention. And so obviously children rather have good attention, and if children can't have good attention, that means they'll do anything for bad attention, because bad attention is still better than no attention. Similarly, good information is best. Failing good information, bad information is better than no information. So first thing to building trust is keeping them informed. And so the second thing Chris talks about in building trust using words is keep it short, concise, to the point. The third is never say anything stupid. And I'm going to sound arrogant and say one thing that's stupid to do, Chris also talks about, I feel is worth a mention onto itself. And it's Chris also says to never lie to somebody you plan on. And then in hostage negotiations, it's best not to the terrorist, though sometimes you have to. And even when you play a terrorist, you don't want to lie to him because the deal might change. You might have to you might end up not a terrorist, and then you got to backtrack on your lies. And so you don't want to lie to a terrorist. Similarly, and I think that's why also add the importance of never lying to somebody. I've experienced mental health injuries. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I'm fortunate I've largely recovered. I'm back to work now, and I would say you don't want to lie to somebody you're planning to save their life. So in schizophrenia, you might be tempted to lie to somebody, even to save their life, though it's best you never lie to somebody. Similarly to schizophrenia, Alzheimer's is another good example where you don't want to lie to somebody with Alzheimer's, even to save their life. What do I mean by that? So unreasonable to not necessary to lie to somebody about going to the grocery store, even if they got schizophrenia. Even if you got to take them to the grocery store, even if you got to leave them at home to go to the grocery store. You don't want to lie to anybody about anything who's struggling with Alzheimer's. The only exception is sometimes you got to lie to them to save their life. And so an example might be if they were married all their life and their life partner died, it's not reasonable to torture somebody with the grief of losing their partner every single day. That's not necessary. That might be the only time you can lie to somebody to save their life with Alzheimer's. Similarly with schizophrenia, never want to lie to somebody with schizophrenia, not even to save their life. The next point is now I've added 2 points to this. Chris had 3. I've added a 4th. There's a 5th I'm forgetting in the moment. And I'm going to skip to the 6th point, and that is building trust using actions. That we do it in the military, though I never realized it till yesterday, or this morning. Yesterday morning I realized Chris didn't label how to build trust. Chris Voss didn't label how to build trust using reliable actions. And that's things like holding the door open for somebody. When you see an obvious action that requires an appropriate reaction, that's a sixth modality of building trust. And in this moment, I'm going to add a seventh. Yesterday, I thought of the sixth being reliable actions, though my seventh point is the difference between building trust and maintaining trust. And the difference is consistency. As I spoke earlier on the military examples, I realized the military builds trust by reliable actions, though you might lose trust by doing something wrong, and you can completely lose trust by denying the wrong things you've done, or you can maintain a certain amount of trust by admitting to your wrongs. And now I remember the fifth point is what Chris Voss, he doesn't label it as a trust building tool, though they may talk about it. They do talk about an accusations audit. And the accusations audit is admitting to something the other person feels about you. And that's similar to admitting to something you've done wrong. Admitting to something you've done wrong is obvious. There's no denying it, though people do. That's where mistrust comes into play. Admitting something you've actually done is a tool to maintain trust, though in the accusations audit, takes it one step further, and it's admitting to something the other person feels about you, whether you agree with it or not. So that's now 7 trust building tools. The first being keeping them informed. Second is keeping it short, concise, to the point. The third is never saying anything stupid. The fourth point on trust building is never lie to somebody you want to, and never lie to somebody you plan to save their life. 7 is, that's 4. 5 is the accusations audit, is admitting to what the other person feels about you. That's 5. 6 is reliable actions. And 7 is consistency. Not necessarily consistency, I should say. The difference between maintaining trust and building trust. 2 different things. And it's important to codify. And that's where rebuilding trust requires consistency. So 7 points on trust building and maintaining trust, building trust, and recovering trust. 7 points. Thanks for your time. Have a good night.